Today, I wanted to touch on something incredibly crucial and severely lacking in society. Every time you choose to believe something, choose what to trust or what to act on, you are using epistemology, even without knowing. Epistemology is the branch of philosophy that asks the most basic questions about knowledge itself. It is, in simple terms, the criteria for how you know something. How do we actually get knowledge? What makes a belief justified rather than just a guess or feeling? It's one of the big three fields of classical philosophy along with ethics and metaphysics. The roots of epistemology stretch in its strongest form to the ancient Greeks. In the 5th and 4th centuries BC, Socrates pioneered the tradition by relentlessly asking two simple but devastating questions. What do you mean? And how do you know? Through his famous dialogues, he exposed how most people hold strong opinions without any clear justification or understanding of their own assumptions. Plato built directly on Socrates' method. In works like The Republic and Theaetetus, he explored whether knowledge is something more than mere true opinion, arguing that genuine knowledge requires a rational account or justification that ties the belief to reality. Aristotle took these ideas further in his Posterior Analytics, insisting that real knowledge comes from grasping causes and first principles, not just from surface-level observation or sensory experience. This classical foundation shaped nearly everything that followed in Western thought. In the 17th century, René Descartes attempted to rebuild the entire structure of knowledge from the ground up with his famous starting point, "I think, therefore I am," seeking certainty through radical doubt. John Locke and David Hume later emphasized empiricism, arguing that all knowledge ultimately derives from sensory experience. In the 20th century, Cornelius Van Til pushed epistemology even deeper with the transcendental argument, showing that the very possibility of logic, truth, and intelligible reasoning presupposes the existence of the Christian God as the ultimate foundation. Van Til demonstrated that every non-Christian system secretly borrows from the Christian worldview to function at all. From Socrates' questioning to Van Til's transcendental critique, epistemology has always been about examining the foundations of what we claim to know and why those foundations either hold or collapse. At its core, epistemology is the study of justifying one's own beliefs. Instead of just assuming your belief to be true, which is begging the question, start thinking about the reasons for your beliefs at a higher order. I say higher order because people tend to struggle to go beyond ordinary thought and grasp higher order thought. Ordinary thought for epistemology would be saying, I know the sun is bright because I can see it. That is ordinary, justified thought. And ordinary thought is perfectly fine, but only if the ordinary thought itself is first justified. You know the sun is bright because you can see it's bright. Cool. But that statement is a truth statement. It's making a claim to what is true. So now truth itself needs to be justified for the statement, the sun is bright because I see it, to be true. Let me break it down for you. That sort of justification is empiricism, the belief that everything is justified through sense data, touch, taste, sight, hearing, smell, and whatever other physical senses humans have. But an issue arises, empiricism cannot be proven through empiricism. It's completely circular and begging the question. Empiricism, in this case, only works if you just assume, without reason, that it works. What if your mind doesn't map onto reality? Empiricism assumes a multitude of things without justification. This is higher order thought. In simple terms, it is thinking about the justification for your justification. How do you know seeing the sun is bright is the proper way to know if the sun is bright or not? It assumes truth, regularity, and order in nature. It assumes meaning, knowledge, and a mind. It assumes that our minds map onto reality and a plethora of other unjustified things. If your reason itself is not justified, then it's circular, and the same thing as saying nothing. It's just assuming something to be true without any reason. I'm going to try to hammer this in because modern society seems to be unable to grasp this concept of justification. How do you know your way of interpreting data is the proper way? Something like empiricism relies on an infinite number of preconditions. So, if you follow empiricism as your epistemology, you will have to try to justify empiricism with empiricism itself, which you will find is impossible, as not only is it circular and begging the question, but the belief of empiricism itself is immaterial, yet material empiricism denies the immaterial. Positivism asserts that only observable, measurable phenomena constitute credible knowledge, focusing on causality and law-like generalizations. Interpretivism holds that subjective meanings and social phenomena are the primary sources of knowledge, emphasizing the context behind human actions. Realism posits that observable phenomena provide facts, though it acknowledges that data may be imperfect or open to misinterpretation depending on the context. Pragmatism accepts both observable phenomena and subjective meanings as valid knowledge, prioritizing practical application and the integration of different perspectives. Foundationalism argues that basic beliefs are justified independently of other beliefs, and coherentism, which claims a belief is justified only if it is consistent with a system of other beliefs. These are all different epistemologies. But these epistemologies all have critical errors. They lack justification for preconditions. Before thinking about what's true and what makes sense, the groundwork for truth itself needs to be laid. Let's be objective and unbiased for a second. If the universe truly is random and has no order, which is the only way for atheism to be consistent, then how do universal orderly laws and truths exist? These preconditions for knowledge, truth, logic, order, and uniformity in nature, a mind, meaning, your mind, mapping onto reality, etc., need to be justified because they go against the nature of an atheist, random chance universe. The atheist world is random, pure chance and material, therefore orderly and immaterial truths and laws inherently contradict that. Thus, they need to be justified. Otherwise, it's just begging the question and circular. In simple terms, epistemologies require things like truth, logic, and ethics to be true. The ability to speak requires these things to be true. Therefore, these things need to be justified. They need to be grounded, and a reason for them needs to be given. One thing I wanted to address super quick was Descartes, I think, therefore I am. He attempts to create a rationale starting point through an axiom. Yet not only is it an unjustified axiom, which is therefore still circular, but he failed to realize that the self is not an isolated starting point. The self also requires other things like truth, reality, reason, the mind, and other categories to be true. Thus, the self cannot exist by itself. To wrap up everything so far, epistemology is how you know what you know. It is your criteria of knowledge. It is the attempt to justify your beliefs rationally with truth and logic. The attempt to avoid unjustified circles and to create a proper grounding for your beliefs. If you understand this, you will 100% be smarter than most of the population. Peace.